Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today's discussion is going to be on the history of spiritual healing. I'd like to talk to you about what the concept of healing used to be in ancient times versus what we've come forward and it compares to now in present day. So, in the beginning of time where humans walked the earth, they believed that every plant material, every cave, every mountain, every river had a life. They perceived life as living, breathing beings, including the trees and the plants, the animals, the grass that grew, and the rocks that they dug up out of the earth. And there was this co-creative collaboration of life, knowing that there was the full cycle of life that went through, and that in one aspect or another, every living being was here to support and to commune with other life on the planet. And they co-created and they used and they supported one another. As human beings, we looked at these other beings as tools that we could utilize for healing. In the beginning, when villages and communities were together and they lived in their grass huts and they moved from station to station depending upon the season and where the abundance of crops and life form that produced with the fruits on the trees and their vegetables that they grew in their gardens and the direction that the herds of the animals went to, they followed that. Similarly to the way they followed the directions of the sun and the moon, knowing that the energies of the other planets that surround Mother Earth guided them and also supported them. It's been long known that the way the moon shifts and the way she breathes and she waxes and wanes guides the flow of the water and the rivers, which then feeds the plant materials and feeds the village. In each village, there was a minimum of one medicine man or medicine woman. Today's time, we call them shamans, but they were the healers at that time for their community. The Anglo-Saxon term of a healer is heal-in. That's the root word of it. We now call them shamans. At certain points in our history, where they were called witches and warlocks and wizards. Today, present time, 2017, we are called spiritual healers. In ancient societies, the medicine person of the village was connected to the planets and the spirits, the outside things that were beyond what we view as the veil of creation. They were able to see auras. They were able to see the magic that was going on in the interconnectedness of the planets and how that communicated and the direct effect that it had on our plant materials and on the life force and the vitality of the areas that they were living in, as well as what was going on in the people in their tribe. They were able to commune with those who have crossed over and received guidance, which we now call intuition. But to them, it was just simple language. There was an ease of communication. There was no question of whether or not they were intuitive. It was just a knowing and a trust and a faith that we had in the fact that we were connected through our hearts and our minds to Mother Earth and heaven above. In that time, the shamans and the medicine people of the communities and the villages, they knew that God had provided everything on the face of the earth that we needed to heal ourselves. God gave us life form in the matter of flowers and of plants and of herbs, and that gave us our food that we took in to feed and sustain ourselves for our vitality and our longevity. They used plant materials and flowers knowing that they embodied a vibrational essence within them, and they had knowledge that if you came to a plant and you met that plant being, that plant spirit, and it knew that you had an opened heart, that you were going to use of that 100% love and light that lies within all of us, that it would share its healing wisdom with us. It happens in an absolute instant that plant will tell us that red raspberry leaf is fabulous for balancing women's hormones and toning our uterus, making us fertile, knowing that we were going to bear strong children that would come into the village and they would take up residence and responsibility in carrying forward the future generations of that time. The flowers, they held a vibrational essence within their petals, and as well as within their scent, their aromas that they gave off, that they would be able to heal us in our spiritual and our emotional bodies. At that point in time, we were seen as divine whole beings. And that meant that we were seen as a spiritual body, a mental body, an emotional body, and a physical body that came into matter. And they used those materials to be able to heal us. So there was something called limpia, where they took the flowers and the herbs and the plant material and they would put them and let them soak into the water, and they may let it sit out and absorb the energy of the sunlight for a more masculine and vitalized energy, or in the moonlight for a softer, more feminine, nourishing energy. And then they would take that plant material, and a client would come in, someone in their village who maybe wasn't feeling well, didn't know what the discord was, but just knew that they maybe had some stress. We call it anxiety in today's society. But they just knew that they were feeling a disharmony, a dis-ease within their system. The medicine person could see where that disease was, where the energy, the prana, the life force was not flowing properly through them in a nice fluid, conforming fashion and feeding all aspects of their bodies. And so they would take that plant material and those flowers and that water, and that person would lie down in front of them, and then they would just take like a fan and they would just hit that person's body and hit their aura, that energetic body that lies around each of us like a cocoon enveloping us in the spirit and the love of God. And they would infuse and merge the vibrational frequency between those plants and the water and the flowers into that person's aura. And our physical being, even through the water, would absorb that frequency into our cells. And that would begin to move wherever that energy was blocked. And it would bring them back into a sense of harmony and into balance. We have the ability in today's time to be able to access the plant spirits just the way we do to access and call upon our ancestors and our guides. We can call out to them. We can ask for the spirit of mugwort to come to us. We can ask for that spirit of dashmula or ashwagandha to bring us energy and vitality. All that we have to do is just open our hearts to that plant spirit and call out its name and invite it to come to us. And it will, and it can infuse us by that energetic osmosis and that co-creation that lies within each one of us in our cells and the cells of the plants and Mother Earth, because we are all part of the collective whole. In addition to the limpia, they would use the toes of goats, which continuously grew. So just like we clip the nails of our dogs and cats, they would actually have to clip the nails of the goats, and they would make those into rattles. When an animal when its life was offered to the body of life of the village in the form of food, they would use all parts of that animal, knowing that it was important. The shamans would take the wings of the chickens or of the hawks or the pheasants that they may be caught, and they roasted and cooked for their families, but they would take those wings, they would keep the feathers, and then they would use them to comb over our aura and to clean out any of those blockages. They would also use it to allow the symbolism and the energy of the peacock or of the hawk or potentially the eagle or the falcon. And that would also bring life force and healing to our beings as well. They used leeches to be able to put on our skin, and they called it bloodletting. We still do that in today's time in Ayurveda, when blood needs cleaned and when it's congealed and it's thick and it's carrying an infection and a heat. In Ayurveda and in Chinese medicine, we call it a heat. I will frequently recommend to my client that they may want to consider going and donating blood, because that's the quickest way to clean the blood, by inviting the body to produce more white blood cells that gives you fresh, clean, enlivened blood. We used rocks. We now call them today as crystals that they dug up from the earth, knowing that they had healing properties, that they carried that frequency and that language, that vocabulary within them that could speak to your spirit and invite your spirit to merge with them and to move your energy in that direction. They used mud and clay for detoxification. We still do that. How many of us take a bath with bentonite clay and Epsom salts? We're still calling in the properties of Mother Earth. We had divination persons, and as they called them, chiromancers. They're called palm readers in today's time. Those who read the ley lines, the information that was held within our palm. We had astrologers and astronomers who read the planets and foretold what was going to come based on the movement and the interplay. And was a planet coming forward and coming closer to us, or was it actually going to recede away from us? How many are familiar with Mercury retrograde? Mercury goes into retrograde, it pulls further away from us, or we rather orbit farther away from it, and things go a little haywire. Things don't necessarily happen in that fashion. Mercury governs electronics and communication. It's our throat chakra and how we relate to the world. Those types of things. And so the astrologers would be able to read all of that in the stars, knowing that we are this one whole cosmos, and they could gather that information, and then they would read that and go back and give that information to their tribe and to their villages, and then they could plan for the future. They did the same and utilized that information as to when they were to plant their crops on the new moon and what planet could be nearby. When's the best time to release? When do we harvest our crops, which is on the full moon? How many of us in today's time write new moon abundance checks or do full moon rituals? We call upon the new moon to plant the seeds of our intention. We activate and engage our mental and emotional body to use and call forth and speak to the universe that which we desire most in our life. And we plant the seeds of intention through that mental and that emotional body. And then we go in the full moon and we reap our harvest. The fall months, wherever you are in the world, when the clock begins to turn and the days are getting shorter and we're growing closer to the solstice, we celebrate the harvest. We offer our deepest gratitude to Mother Earth and all the bounty that she brings to us through our gardens and our crops that we take in. And we use that to feed our families in the wintertime. This was long our history, and for thousands and thousands of years, this was how human beings traveled on Mother Earth, and this was how they navigated, utilizing all of this information for support for themselves and their brothers and sisters and their family of the village. Then came kings and queens, and the concept of organized religion and the church, and having legalization of physicians. Many, many times the kings and queens, and we can look back in history, and now in today's time, we're circling around on the spiral of time, and history is repeating itself in certain ways. But even the kings and queens of old, they would go to their seers, their intuitives and their visionaries, and they would go to the astrologers and the astronomers, and they would gather that information to know, should they invade another country? Should they go to the other side, and should they engage in war? What will happen to the crops that they tax their villagers on, and how is that going to affect their bottom line? But they would still go and they would practice the bloodletting, and they would use their herbs. They would even use witchcraft and spell casting, because all spell casting is the same thing that we do now on the new moon. We utilize and we engage our voice and activate what is going on in the mental and the emotional body, and we put it into words. We speak it out into the world, and that's all spellcasting is. It's just an invocation of what lies within our heart, of what we'd like to create for our lives and for our world. Things began to change when organized religion had greater power and greater support and more monetary embellishments. And there was a partnership between the government, which was the kings and queens and the princes and the princesses, and the co-collaboration of different countries and who was going to marry who and what would make a good alliance. Well, those governments found the need to create alliances with the church. And there began to be this governing belief that there should be monetary exchange, there should be taxing, there should be laws and regulations. And I have no doubt, although this is not stated anywhere that I have read, so I will not say that this is fact, this is merely my speculation, that there was bartering happening between the kings and queens and what was government and what church held. And then came this moderation of what a physician could and could not do, and what we as human beings were capable of. And through the infusion of the government and the organized religion, they didn't see the value in the plant material. They lost sight of the value in being in a harmonious state of life with the moon and with the tides. If they didn't feel that it could be a commodity and a piece of commerce, then it lost value. And so in 1542, Henry VIII passed the first Witchcraft Act, where if you were caught practicing witchcraft, astrology, seeing, spell casting, bloodletting with leeches, reading aurors, seeing visions like Nostradamus, you could be killed. Witches and wizards, shamans, anyone who communicated and accessed and utilized the spirit world and the energetic vibration that other beings outside of us in human form could be drowned, hanged, stoned, burned at the stake. And so many of us, as spiritual healers today, we've come along in the spiral of time, and history does repeat itself. We've found our way back to the spiritual components and seeing the life of the trees and the life of the plants, and we're able to utilize that and access that information. Because as human beings, as life forms on this planet, every cell that we are has divine intelligence. We, each of us, as a living, breathing being, is an alchemist. An alchemist transforms energy into matter. We know alchemists of age-old times to be able to transform lead into gold. We as physical beings, we take in the aromas and the essence of a flower. We take in the food and the plant material, and we put that into our body and we ingest it, and we invite our body to digest that information, that nutrition, and break it down and feed all of the cells of our body. In Ayurveda, it takes 35 days from the meal that we just last had to go through all 7 layers of our tissue to be utilized into fuel and to feed each layer of the tissue. And it takes 35 days to complete that cycle. In 7 years, our entire body is anew. Our cells turn over rapidly. We create a new liver. We create new reproductive organs. We create new muscle tissue and new brain cells. Every 7 years, we are whole and complete again. In 1563, Queen Elizabeth, King Henry VIII, his daughter, passed another law, and she revisited what the witchcraft meant, taking in new pieces. At that time, she included astrologers, which in 1542, astrologers were not. Now, in 1735, the act was amended again, because at that time, church and government had made the decision that it was not possible for witchcraft to be performed. It was not a possible reality for any human being to commune with the animal world or with the plant spirits, or to know the meaning of the water or the earth and to transmute any of that energy. That was where the separation between mind, body, and spirit really began to dissect itself and take on a life form of its own. So in 1735, the new aspect of the Witchcraft Act was that anyone that was caught pretending to practice witchcraft was guilty. They had to believe that they were pretending because the church and the government had decided that it was not humanly possible to be able to access any spiritual realm other than through the Catholic or the Protestant church. That direct connection between us and God, and that God and the church's view of the God was the governing body. In today's society, allopathic Western medicine views the physical body as the physical body. The mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, they have no effect on the physical body. In today's society, we are abundantly gifted with the advancements of technology. Western medicine is extraordinary for being able to diagnose illnesses and to be able to save our lives with many, many things that was not available back in 452. In 1944, the last woman by the name of Helen Duncan, she was the last person to be imprisoned by the Witchcraft Act. She spent 9 months in jail because she was accused of reading information and acting as a medium and communicating information from the spirit world that had a direct effect on someone's physical property, which is an aspect of the act that was passed in 1735. Anyone could be put to death or imprisoned if they're pretending to perform some type of psychic, medium, witchcraft act affected someone's physical life, because only through a direct effect in the physical world could they prove that we were pretending. In 1951, the Witchcraft Act was repealed, and in its place became the Fraudulent Act. Any person who professes to be a psychic medium or a clairvoyant and advertising and utilizing that information to sell a service of exchanged information can still be imprisoned today in 2017. So as I said, history repeats itself, and we are spiraling around to the cusp of a time that we previously had. We're just at a different layer. As people come forward and they're open and honest to really look at themselves as a whole being, knowing and understanding how their mental and emotional and spiritual body has a direct impact on their physical body. And we can once again adopt and open our hearts and our minds to the information that God already provided for us on Mother Earth, and that all that we need is already here for us, then we begin living as a whole being rather than divided. We will stop stuffing down our emotions and stuffing down our thoughts, and we will stop not saying the things that we want to say and instead saying things that we just don't believe are true in the hopes of being accepted and being seen and loved or acknowledged by our family or our church or our school or our government. And that is what being a whole, perfect, divine creature is knowing that we are mind, body, spirit. We are all of it, and one does not exist without the other. Today in 2017, I am very honored to be part of SomaEnergetics. And SomaEnergetics is a beautiful company that has been around for 17 years. It was founded by David Hulse and Tim Leach. And the premise of the company is utilizing sound and vibrational frequency to offer healing to persons. In SomaEnergetics, they view us as whole, perfect beings, knowing that we are not separate bodies, that we are not only physical, We are all of those subtle bodies, and all of them interplay and they feed and they co-create between one another to create who we present ourselves today. SomaEnergetics also knows that it is not me, it is not I or we or you that is the actual healer. Their perspective, and I share this perspective with them, is that divinity lives within every cell of our body. Divine grace, God-like intelligence and love and light lives within every cell of our body. We as human beings are chalices of that energy. We gather that information, we gather that love and that light and that knowledge to come through us. We are not the doers. We don't fix anyone, we don't create anything, we don't change anything. We utilize tuning forks and all that is available to us in the sound and frequency world. And we utilize that to merge and to communicate with the mental and the emotional and the physical body. We tune the cells so that they remember the divinity that lies within them. We awaken the healer that lies within each and every breathing being on earth, including Gaia herself. How many of you have sat and watched a movie like The Notebook and it emotes such a volume of feelings, the tears stream down your face, it opens up your heart and you feel that emotion and you feel it in every cell of your body. And then maybe we leave the video or the movie theater and we go get in our car and Pharrell Williams' song Happy comes on. And every cell in our body begins singing along with Pharrell. And we dance in our seat because the song makes us so joyous. That's sound and vibrational healing. And what we feel in our thoughts and in our emotions directly affects our being and inspires how we move through our life, what we do next, how we create, what we'll have for dinner, the choices that we make. Are we happy or are we sad? Do we feel inspired and creative, or do we feel overwhelmed and we feel the need to disassociate with life? As I said, as a practitioner, as a spiritual healer, I do not view us as separate. I see us as one whole being. And when I step forward to meet my client for a tuning fork session, for a spiritual healing session, it's not my business where they've been. I don't need to know what's going on in their physical bodies. We don't have to talk about any type of disease. I just really am concerned about how they're feeling. They sit down on my table and I say a prayer and I communicate with God and I ask God to channel his energy, knowing that I am merely that human chalice for that God energy. I ask my ego, the mind that says I do something, which I really don't, but that I am aspect of the ego, I ask that energy to please step aside. And I see myself as this channel of light, inviting God into my spirit and asking God to work through me and to offer his or her love, her frequency to that client. However that client needs that energy or that frequency to move through them and work within them. Whatever needs to be remembered or awakened within them. It's not my business what's going on with my client. It's not my business how God chooses to communicate with that person and the work that God needs to do. I am just a chalice, a vessel for that energy, that's God's spirit, to move through me so that that person's soul, their mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical body remembers how beautiful they are and what extraordinary beings of light they are. And so that is my perspective on being a spiritual healer. And that is what Soma Energetic represents and what it offers to its clients utilizing the sound and the vibrational frequency of solfeggio forks. And so I invite you to contact their website, www.somaenergetics.com, or speak to any of the practitioners, or feel free to call David or Tim and talk more about it if you're interested in learning more or becoming a practitioner or potentially a teacher. Thank you very much for your time.